Yeah.
So there's this Chinese mukbanger. I don't know if you watch her.
Yeah.
This mukbanger does timed mukbangs.
Like
so
what,
she'll
she's-
sit there.
Speed?
No, she'll sit there for 6 hours doing mukbangs. And
How much is she eating?
fam, a lot. And in the middle of her video, her stomach started bleeding.
She had to go to the hospital?
Rushed to the hospital, and the nurse kind of did like what you did. Yeah, they fixed it and stuff, which is, it was miraculous that they even fixed
They
that.
could fix it and just let her go?
Yeah, and they let her go, right? And they said, you have to stop doing videos. And the parents were like,
Yeah.
listen to the nurse, stop doing the
That's her
mukbang video.
livelihood, bro. That's
Yes.
her livelihood. You can't
So
just give it
she was like, since this is my life, I have to keep doing it. So the next week does a 10-hour mukbang, live stream, presses the record button, sits there and eats, dies on camera because her stomach finally ripped apart. And they did the autopsy, and her stomach had uneaten food, so she was just swallowing stuff at one point. So she was swallowing pizza full, hamburgers, not chewing shit, ripped open.
Damn, she was just like vacuuming it, bro.
Crazy. Sometimes I looked in your eye and I was like, I noticed that you don't have that white under your eye.
What?
Do you know senpuku?
What is that?
So senpuku is like a Japanese superstition that means 3 whites. You have white under your eye, it means that the world is out to get you.
What?
There's different celebrities that have that white under their eye. Very noticeable. Like their pupils are up here, but you see a lot of white. You know who had a really famous celebrity that had one? JFK. What happened to him? Assassinated.
How do you see that though? Like,
You see how there's no white, right?
yeah.
And you see here where you have white under your eye.
Oh,
And
when your eyelids don't cover the pupil.
Yeah, the pupil.
Then you look a little bit scarier when
You do
have
too.
that shit.
That's why I've caught myself kind of doing that to people. I'm like, I just kind of look and see like, okay, I'm not gonna stay around him because
Yeah.
the world is out to get him, fam.
Word, yeah.
Hosts in Japan are pretty much handsome men that you pay to talk to. They work at a bar, you go into the bar, and instead of, you know how you go to the club and you buy a bottle of champagne? That champagne is gonna be overpriced because you're at the club. But you're gonna drink it with your friends, you're doing shots, you got the VIP people, got the sparklers, that's gotta be a fire hazard, and they're pumping it up in the sky. Well, these clubs, you go to share the drink basically with the bartender. You're like, I'm gonna pay more money so that you sit and you talk to me and you hang out with me and you pour my champagne. Their entire job is to be a Rizzler by looking good and being charming. You should pretty much feel like you're on a date with an attractive man who gives you endless compliments. Host clubs are literally ego bars. I would go for an ego boost. I don't know. Maybe. I don't think I would. Perhaps. Depends.
Honestly, like, that job sounds hard as hell.
You go there and you get an ego boost and you walk out, and it's kind of dangerous because you walk out of there and you're like, wait, I know that was a host bar, but I think he's in love with me. I think he wants to marry me. So I'm going to come back tomorrow just to verify and spend even more money. That's the point. Their goal is for you to spread that wallet wide open so that they can just get all up in there. They're hustling, yeah. And Roland is the king of hosts. He's actually known in Japan as being the top host. Did you know manga is the reason that he became a host in the first place? Roland read a manga called Yao, and it's about a guy who drops out of school to move to the big city and becomes a super successful host. So that's exactly what Roland does. And he just loves anime, honestly. He kind of looks like the Yao character on the manga.
I have to start this video off with a strong trigger warning. We are going to be talking about some very heavy subjects. Documentaries have always held this ability to scare me way more than any movie can. And there are many documentaries that have been made that can be seen as going too far. And there are a few documentaries that I have found it very difficult to even finish. My name's Ricky, I love documentaries, and here's a list of documentaries so disturbing I almost didn't finish. So first up we have Earthlings. So Earthlings was released in 2005 and is narrated by Joaquin Phoenix. Essentially this is a documentary about what we as humans are doing to the planet. This one was so hard to get through because it's graphic depiction of animal suffering. And in fact this was one of the documentaries that led me towards becoming vegetarian years ago. This is a very hard documentary to finish. So next up we have The Bridge. The Bridge was released in 2006 and is an incredibly sad and difficult documentary to finish. It's about the Golden Gate Bridge, but in particular the amount of people who unalive themselves via that bridge. The filmmaker sets a camera up and films the bridge for a year, and then traces down the family members of the people who he has unfortunately managed to film. it's so difficult to get through because it's so incredibly sad. Next up we have Hated Gigi Allen. This is a documentary about a guy called Gigi Allen who was in a punk rock band during the 80s. The reason this one is so hard to get through is because he is such an arsehole. And this documentary literally documents every single bad thing that this guy did. Some of the stuff shown in this documentary I can't explain on here, but be warned, this is a disgusting documentary. So next up we have Orozco the Embalmer. This is the only documentary on this list that I did in fact actually turn off. This documentary is exactly what it sounds like. We follow around a guy who is an embalmer. The reason I turned this documentary off was for the reasons you're probably thinking I turned the documentary off. It's very heavy, it's very graphic, and just not something that at that point in my life I wanted to be watching. And finally we have Dear Zachary. Every time I make one of these videos, in my comments, hundreds of you suggest Dear Zachary. This is one of the hardest documentaries you will ever have to watch. This is a true crime documentary that takes you on a ride that, if you're not prepared for, will completely break you. It's incredibly disturbing and incredibly sad.
There's a brand new, gory Italian horror with an old school Italian horror style and starring Lauren Lavera. Inject that directly into my eyeballs. The Well releases today on video on demand. It follows Lauren's character Lisa, who is an art restorer from America. She travels to a beautiful home in Italy because she has been commissioned to restore a very old piece of art that was damaged during a fire. You would think Lauren Lavera would want absolutely nothing to do with art. That's a little joke about Terrifier 2. Please clap. However, this painting holds a curse, and revealing the painting will have horrific events. Film looks fantastic, and I think it would have benefited from a score that was more creepy strings and brass instruments than what they went with. The gore is excellent, and for the first hour or so I was very into this movie. It does take a detour in the final third where it gets a little silly and it doesn't quite match the brilliance of the first two acts, but I did love the look of some of the bad guys here. I'd say if you're a fan of gory and grotesque horror movies, it's definitely worth adding The Well to your watch list.
This was the real-life Hunger Games. During the early 1900s, a multi-trillionaire named Cranjis McBasketball held a very dark secret competition. What he did was gather people through timeshares and trick them into signing a contract to be in the games. No one in the public knew about the games, except Cranjis's fellow rich friends who would watch and bet on competitors to win. The games would have 40 total competitors all set up into pairs, and the last team standing or person would win. The prize was $30 million, but if the winners told anybody how they won the money when they returned home, they would be taken out. In 1915, during the 5th annual games, things did not go as planned for Cranjis. It started out as normal, with over half the competitors being taken out in the first few minutes, but eventually the remaining couples refused to fight each other and all gathered up with one another to protest. This made Cranjis furious, so he stepped out onto the platform that overlooked the arena and yelled, "Y'all are embarrassing me in front of my friends." But before he could finish his rant, he was struck by an arrow and fell down into the arena below. The competitors were able to escape and eventually contact the authorities, which led to the arrest of most of Cranjis's friends.
I guess we're gonna be continuing some knock-knock stories, except for this one comes with a little bit of a twist. This story is from Janet here on TikTok. Thank you so much for letting me share this story with everyone. She starts off this story saying that she listened to one of your stories. Wait, give me a second. I'm gonna put the story here. It's Knock at Midnight, just in case you want to go back and listen to that. But she listened to that story and it triggered a memory of something that happened to her that was very similar. Reading her story reminded me of something very specific, but I'm not gonna tell you until the very end. The other day I was listening to one of your knock-knock stories about someone who had a knock on their door on New Year's Eve midnight, and it brought a memory that I put out of my mind for a while. It was around 2015 and we were celebrating. As I was prepping the cider cups with 12 grapes in the kitchen, I felt a weird feeling that someone was staring at me from outside of my back door. I don't remember if she knocked, or as I turned to see and walked closer to the door, I noticed what looked like a young woman. Not sure, but she looked between between 15 to 23 years old, but very short and petite. She told me she needed to pee urgently and asked if she could come in the house. I'm a school teacher and I'm always willing to help people, but it was not in my nature to tell her to go away, but I did. I told her to go use the neighbor's restroom because I thought she was one of them, or go to the restaurant to use their restrooms about 1 block away. I forgot to mention that she was at my back door, and in order to get to it, she had to walk through a driveway my neighbors and I shared. Between the pair of cars, even though it was not my initial thought, I later found it odd that she squeezed through the driveway exclusively to get to my back door and not walk up my front very well lit porch. Red flags. But at the time, I didn't think about it. All I felt was the need to get her away from me, away from my family. I was repelled by her and I just wanted her to leave. So I apologized but said no. She insisted I let her in and repeated, "Let me use your restroom, let me in." I dismissed her as a drunken girl my neighbors might have invited. I then went back to my living room to do the countdown with my family, and as we were done, I was putting the cups in the sink. I again felt that dreaded pit in my stomach, feeling that someone was there. I go to the door cautiously, and again the tiny girl was there. I now was a lot harsher and a lot more insistent for her to leave. I felt so angry and desperate for her to leave, not a feeling a young woman would cause in me normally. By this time, my family noticed my anger. They kept me in the living room, and when the girl came to the door for the 3rd time, my older sister, who was a social worker, went to the door. To her, she changed her story and told her she was left behind by someone and needed to come in and call her family. From the living room, I responded loudly and desperately for her to not let her in, so the girl finally left when we called the cops. That seemed to work and she left and didn't come back. 3 other weird facts: I was never able to see her face because she stood directly under the backyard light shadow. My husband was able to get out of his shift and rush home to be able to be with us for the last bit of the celebration. When he pulled into the driveway, he should have been able to see her if she was walking out and away of the backyard, but he saw nothing. And lastly, my dogs were in the room literally right by where she was standing, yet neither of them even barked. So by the time I got to this part of the story, I was like, black-eyed kids. They have to be black-eyed kids because insistent on coming in, couldn't see their face, looked like a kid. I never knew what it was, and some friends mentioned it might have been black-eyed children. I remember that I never got to see her eyes because she was standing in the same spot under the lamp. I have read black-eyed kid stories, and it's always that same feeling of like dread of not wanting to let them in, which is crazy because normally if a kid's knocking on your door, you don't feel that way. So like, fuck that. I think it's time to put a Ring camera on the back door too, because what the fuck? So be honest, was anybody else listening to this and thinking it sounds like black-eyed kids?
I fucking love this movie and I think it's super underrated. Let's do it. Cam is about this girl named Alice Ackerman who is a cam girl who goes by the name Lola Lola. She is obsessed with her ranking on the cam girl site, and we actually see that she's doing pretty good. She's in the top 60 when we first meet her. She does this show one night where she does like a fake sewer slide and her ranking goes up. We see she also has 2 really loyal viewers, one of which being this guy who goes by the name of Tinker, and another being this dude named Barney, and they both pay her for private sessions. Alice's mom has no idea about her cam girl career and thinks that she works in web development, but her brother Jordan does know about it and keeps pushing Alice to tell their mother, which she says she is going to do eventually once her ranking is better. One night Barney is talking to Alice and he says that he's going to be in her area, so the 2 of them plan to meet up for a date when he's there. Meanwhile, she also starts to notice that Tinker is showing up places where she is. So she's getting like super creeped out by him. She's like ignoring his calls. During a show one night, Alice ends up hitting top 50. She pulls this confetti. She's celebrating. But then all of a sudden her ranking starts drastically dropping and she's out of top 50. And it's because this other girl, Princess, is like, if you drop Lola's ranking, like I'll do whatever. So the next night she goes to this cam girl house that's not far from her to do a show with another one of her friends. But then the next morning she wakes up and sees that she cannot get into her account. She is locked out. But she sees that it says that she's online. And when she goes to look at it, it's a video of her in her room. So she calls like the help center and is like, I'm locked out of my account and I think you guys are replaying an old show or something. And they're like, well, we don't have the capability of doing that. So Lola signs into this backup account that she has and messages the Lola that's putting on this show. And that Lola responds in real time. So now Alice knows that they are not replaying an old show and whoever this person is has like taken her identity and looks exactly like her. She goes back to the cam house thinking that one of the girls fucked with her account while she was there the night before, but they all swear they did not. So Alice continues to try and call the help center about her account because they still can't get her in. But now when she goes to give her access code, which she had done before, it doesn't even exist anymore. And they tell her the person who's currently live putting on shows matches the description of the person whose account this is, so like we can't fucking help you. So Alice is getting increasingly more stressed, and one day she has to go to her brother Jordan's birthday party. As she's there, some of Jordan's lame-ass fucking friends are watching a live cam recording of her, but we know it's not actually her. A fight breaks out between Jordan and these boys, and they come out with the phone and like expose Lola to the whole party, including her mother. So Lola's fucking devastated. Her mom now knows in the worst way possible, and she storms out. That night, Alice is watching a Lola show, and Lola stages her own sewer slide, kind of like Lola had did at the beginning. But it's so realistic, and Alice gets so freaked out that she calls the cops. And when they get there, they are just huge fucking assholes. One of them tries to like solicit Alice, and then they ultimately tell her, we can't do shit, like you're out of luck. One night, Alice sees fake Lola announce that she's going to be doing a show with Baby, who is like the cam girl that holds the #1 ranking. And Alice tries to get in contact with Baby, but she can't. So the time comes around where Barney and Alice set up that date, and she goes to meet him because she knows that he has contact with Baby. He gives Alice information about Baby that helps her like locate where she's from and what her real name is. And then Barney logs on his phone and sees that Lola is live, so he's with real Alice while watching fake Lola. So he like attacks her and is like, you're obviously lying to fucking scam me, but Alice manages to get away. And when she uses the information that he gave her to look up Baby, she finds the real Baby and discovers that she died in a car accident 6 months prior. So how the fuck is she still on this cam girl site? So Alice starts looking at all of the top friends of the top cam girls and discovers that Tinker is all of their #1 friend, or their top fan. So Alice shows up at Tinker's hotel room to ask him for help. When she wakes up in the middle of the night, she finds Tinker in the bathroom having a private session with fake Lola. Alice approaches the camera and says hi to Lola, and Lola says hi. And she's confused, like she doesn't recognize Alice, so like she doesn't even know what she looks like. So Alice does what any logical person would do and tases Tinker and demands information. Tinker explains that they've been doing this for years on different cam girl sites, and he's gotten so used to it that he's now able to recognize when they're about to make a replica of somebody, like who they're going to target. But he insists that he is not behind it at all. So now enraged, Alice goes back home and she makes her setup like this. So the camera's here and the monitor is facing the mirror. And by doing this, when she's on camera, it creates an illusion that there are multiple Alices. And under a fake account, Alice gets on a private session with fake Lola. Lola, again, still does not recognize Alice because she has no fucking idea what she looks like because she's fake. And Alice suggests to Lola that they go live together, which Lola accepts. So they go live, and everybody in the chat is going insane because they're like, wow, this is a crazy effect. Does she have a twin? What's going on? And Alice challenges Lola to a game where they have to like do exactly what the other one does, like monkey see, monkey do. And the viewers in the chat have to vote on which one did it best. And whichever one did it best can tell the other to do something. So Lola starts out having them do cute shit like blow a kiss, whatever, and Lola keeps winning. But eventually Alice looks up at Lola and says, you stole my face and I want it back. And she smashes her face on her vanity and breaks her fucking nose. When she looks back at the screen, Lola's face starts to distort like her nose is broken too, because again, she's a fucking replica. And the viewers vote that Alice won. So Alice demands from Lola, give me your account password. And Lola fucking does it. She sends a private message to Alice with the password. Alice signs in and she hovers over the delete button considering, and ultimately she presses delete and deletes Lola's account as she hits the #1 ranking. Some time goes by and we see Alice getting her makeup done by her mother, so obviously they've reconciled. And her mother is asking Alice, well, what if the same thing happens again? And Alice says, then I'll just make another one, and then another one. And sure enough, we see Alice go home that night and make a new cam girl account with a fake name and a fake identity. And she starts all over again in the dead last ranking, which is like 167 something thousand. She logs in for her first live video and the movie ends. I sure can, and I'm so glad that you asked. So this is in response to the movie review that I did on stream, which is in theaters as of August 21st. And in that review, I talked about how I wanted to see this movie so bad because of all of the horror legends and icons that are in the cast. Starting off with one of my favorite people on this fucking planet, Tony motherfucking Todd. I have been obsessed with this man since I watched Candyman. I think this is his best role. I think this is one of the best roles in horror cinema, period. Candyman is one of my favorite villains, if not honestly my favorite villain, because of Tony Todd, because he's just so sophisticated and enticing, and like you're supposed to not like him. He's a villain, but you just love him. He plays Candyman in 3 movies and then briefly reappears in the Candyman 2021 version. He also plays the Mortician in the Final Destination franchise. He plays Ben in the Night of the Living Dead remake. And he's in like hundreds and hundreds of other movies. And he is a fucking icon and I'm obsessed with him. And he's in stream, and when he shows up, because it's kind of like more towards the end, I literally like shed a fucking tear. His voice, his character, everything about this man, I would do anything for him. Arguably the biggest icon, though, in this movie is Dee Wallace. Dee Wallace played the mother in E.T. My favorite role of Dee Wallace's, another mother role, is the mother in Cujo. I think she was snubbed for this because I think her performance in Cujo was one of the greatest performances in horror cinema / like cinema period. She's another one. She's just in hundreds of other things. She's in The Howling. She's in the original The Hills Have Eyes. Like, she's been doing horror for decades. And she's in stream, and it's so heartwarming to see her. Danielle Harris is one of the main characters in stream, and she plays a mother of a teenager, which is crazy to me, because her start was in the original Halloween franchise playing Jamie in Halloween 4 and 5. And then my favorite thing that Rob Zombie ever did was cast her in his Halloween remake in 2007 where she played Annie. Like, the fact that she was a kid in the original, like, this is just such a full circle thing. She's also in a bunch of other horror movies, Hatchet 2. She's just a horror queen. And she is quite literally a scream queen. Like, she actually has one of my favorite screams in horror cinema. Jeffrey Combs is also in stream, and he looks very different now, I think, but he played Herbert West in the iconic Reanimator movies. He's another icon. He's been in a bunch of other horror movies. One of my favorites that I mentioned in my review is Would You Rather? I just love him so much. Alyssa Rose is also in this movie. That's another name that I mentioned, and she is most known for playing Angela in Sleepaway Camp. Bill Moseley is another one of my favorite people ever. If you have ever seen a Rob Zombie movie, I guarantee you've seen Bill Moseley. He most notably, I think, plays Otis Firefly in House of a Thousand Corpses, Devil's Rejects, 3 from Hell. He also plays Chop Top in Texas Chainsaw 2. But he's another one. He literally has like hundreds of horror movie credits under his belt. David Howard Thornton is also in this movie, and he, of course, plays one of my favorites, Art the Clown, Icon. Tim Reed from the It miniseries in 1990 is in this movie. And there is another very special person from that same miniseries that has a brief part in this movie, and they will remain nameless.
You ever hear about the Irwin Saunders case?
No.
So Irwin Saunders, he's this YouTuber that went missing, but all of his content, it was about him searching for fairies. And it sounds dumb, right? It sounds like, oh, he's searching for pixies, he's searching for fairies. It sounds like dumb shit. But he was serious, man.
Okay.
Like, he was looking into all of these mythologies. He was dead ass studying it, almost like his whole channel, but it might very well be like his whole life.
Okay.
He was posting consistently almost every single week until he posted like his last video. And all it was like a blank, it's a cryptid drawing of fairies around a stone, and it had these weird symbols on it.
Yeah.
And that was it. That was his last video.
Oh, that's it?
So people are saying he was onto something and he found like the secret to something.
Yo.
And he might have like went missing because of where
it.
he explored to.
Yeah. Do you know where it is, or?
So,
Cause let's finish this video.
This happened. The video is just bullshit. Like, it's nothing, right?
Yeah.
But it had everyone guessing. Now check this out. I decided to look into his content. I watched like a good amount of his videos and shit. Man, this shit has to be CGI though. Like, all of his stuff has to be CGI.
Oh, that's...
This shit is probably all fake. But after his last video, he ended up uploading again, fam.
Whoa.
So he pretty much, he's smart as shit. What he did, he made it seem as if he went missing so he can take a break from YouTube.
Yo, marketing genius.
So
man.
he took a break from YouTube and made it seem like, yo, what happened? He's on his way to like the adventure. He's on his way to solve all of these things.
Yeah.
Gone, and then comes back and then starts making more videos.
Okay.
And I looked at all the comments and, yo, mad people are really enjoying the content. And it's obvious that like it's not necessarily real.
Okay.
But mans are there for the story and how it's like I guess almost directed, because honestly it's like a movie.
Yeah. So if it's not real.
The most wanted man in Japan, not as a fugitive, as a boyfriend, is taken and is in a committed relationship and has been for over a year. Roland posted a new video on his YouTube channel and he titles this video, "I actually have a girlfriend I've been dating for a year."
Wow.
Roland is not just dating any girl either, but a Japanese actress, Rika Adachi. At one point, they're sitting at the dining table, and he's all, I'm gonna tell everyone. I'm gonna tell everyone that we're dating. We should go public. And then he grabs her head, and he smooches her. Oof, it's so cute. This is how they go public with this vlog. And he's like, it's just hard that we're always hiding behind the cameras. I just want to be able to be free with you. And she's all like, it's so cute. The whole thing is so cute. And then at the end, they go upstairs and there's footage of them opening the door to the mirror bedroom.
Oh.
And then they close it shut. Oh! Oh! Some stuff is about to happen, right? Oh. And then 2 years later in 2023, Rika breaks the internet with her wedding photos. And I'm like, it's gonna be the most glamorous wedding with mirrors everywhere. I can just feel it. Except it's not. Because the guy she's marrying is not Roland. In fact, they never actually dated.
What?
10 days after they post the first video announcing their relationship, Roland posts a second video called I Had a Date with Rika Adachi at My House. But this video is completely different. It starts by showing us snippets from their first date leading up to their kiss, but then the screen goes black and it fades to a shot of Rika and Roland in his living room surrounded by a whole production team. It was all acting. It's a prank.
I don't even know if there's anything I can say to prepare you. Not only is this one of the most hauntingly disturbing, fucked up movies I've ever seen, but it's also one of the most beautiful. I'm Chuck. I'd love to be your movie guy. Hit the like button, give me a follow, and this is Flowers by Phil Stevens. Let's get it completely out of the way. If you're triggered by anything, stay the fuck away from this film because it's not for you. This is buckets of gore, buckets of torture, buckets of everything you could think of. There's full frontal nudity. There's a scene of penetration. It's fucked up. And the film has absolutely no dialogue whatsoever. It instead relies on sound design, sound effects, and the score to carry and move along the story. The story centers on 6 different women that are trapped in this crawl space under a serial killer's home. Each one of them has a mutilated part of their body that has been sewn together. And the crawl space is a metaphor for purgatory. From the expressions and the emotions on the 6 different women's faces, it paints a picture of the serial killer in the home. And trust me, you will feel every ounce of every one of their pain and trauma that they felt from what they've been through. From the opening sequence of this woman crawling through the excrement and the leftover remains of other victims to find her way through this home sets a tone like nothing I've seen before. There's a lot of extreme films that are just gore for the sake of gore, or torture for the sake of torture. This seems to be a very allegorical film about letting go after the unimaginable has happened to you. Process and deal with that trauma to move on to whatever may be the afterlife. Essentially reliving your nightmare all over again. This film is absolutely brilliant. It's one of the hardest, most difficult watches I've had in quite some time. You can find Flowers on Phil Stevens' YouTube. I will link it below. I'm Chuck. I'd love to be your movie guy. Hit the like button. Give me a follow.
Okay, everyone shut the fuck up. Nobody panic because I just saw Stream and holy shit, what a fucking banger. Stream has been one of my most anticipated movies of this year because of the fucking horror legends that are in the cast. Like literally everybody who's anybody in the horror world is in this movie. Dee Wallace, Tony Todd, Bill Moseley, David Howard Thornton, Felissa Rose, Danielle Harris, Jeffrey Combs. Like the list goes on, and not to mention a very special guest at the end that like literally brought a tear to my eye. So Stream comes out in theaters on August 21st, but I was lucky enough to see it early and I just saw it this week. So this movie is not going to be for everybody. I already know that because I know not everybody loves blood and gore. However, I do. So I was the target audience for this movie. So Stream is about this family of 4. The mother is played by Danielle Harris, a fucking queen. And they go to this hotel for like a weekend getaway and they find themselves in the middle of this game. Yeah, you guessed it. The game is just these 4 killers like going on a rampage and murdering whoever they can in the fucking hotel. The kills and the gore in this movie is so Terrifier coded because Damien Leone did the effects. I love everybody who's in this movie so much. Like, I heard the first syllable of Tony Todd's voice and I shed a fucking tear and almost passed away because of how obsessed I am with that man, and seeing him and like his part is just so fucking mind-blowing. Something I love about David Howard Thornton too is he's in this movie and he plays one of the killers, and like he doesn't even, his face does not show, but just in his movements you can tell that it's him. Like you can immediately spot him in this movie without even seeing his face, and that is just such an incredible talent to me. Jeffrey Combs' role in this too, like he kind of stole the show for me. His character was so reminiscent of his character from Would You Rather, which is such an underrated banger, and I fucking love him in that too. This movie, I just loved it so much because it is just such a love letter to the horror genre and the horror community as a whole, because again, just seeing all of these icons, all these legends in one movie is so fucking incredible for those of us who just love them and love the movies that they're in and love the genre. I've been looking for a movie to like satiate me until Terrifier 3 comes out, and this is the one. This movie gets an 8 out of 10 for me. Again, I know it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but it is definitely mine.
I don't know if you noticed it. This is wild. In The Incredibles, remember when Mr. Incredible was sneaking out to be a superhero still?
Yeah.
Because being a superhero was not allowed anymore. And Mrs. Incredible was curious, like, why is he always going out? What is this going on? As kids watching this, I never bagged it. But remember she was in the room and she was like picking up the hair and stuff. She was like, whose hair is this?
Yeah.
Off his suit. And she realized, yo, he's going out. He's going out and stuff. Now, theory goes that Mrs. Incredible, throughout the film, we know what's Mrs. Incredible's powers?
Elastic.
She was making her body more voluptuous to combat Mr. Incredible suspicion of being a cheater.
Oh, that's kind of crazy.
So that's why, remember when she goes to save Mr. Incredible?
Yeah.
And she's looking in the mirror like that? Is because she's looking at her new body that she gave herself to get Mr. Incredible to stay with her.
That's kind of crazy. No, because I feel like, yeah, that's definitely... I don't know if you heard the song, I think it was called Gloomy Sunday.
Nah, I never heard it.
It was written during World War I or World War II, but it's like pronounced the deadliest song to man. Don't listen to it, because I've seen comments where it's like, oh, if they listen to it too much, they get a headache.
You get like...
Yeah, you get a headache.
Just listening?
Yeah, because like during, this guy who wrote it during the war, he was moving from Hungary all the way to the US, right? And he wrote it while the war is going on. And like the people that was around him, when he sang it to them, like they all killed themselves after.
Damn.
Yeah. And it's like, people are saying like, maybe because it's about like when they were in war, you get depressed while you're going through war. But like the whole song is written in minor chords.
So
it's sad chords.
It took them to like a frequency that's lower.
Yeah, that was lower. Yeah.
Oh shit.
And like to get weirder, once he actually dropped it officially, he killed himself 2 years after the song. The writer, and anybody who did a cover, and they tried to put it on radio, they banned it.
Damn.
Yeah.
Don't listen to the song.
So Gloomy Sunday. No, low-key try. Because I don't want to do it.
That's just like the X song.
Which X song?
X had a song called Blue Valentine.
Oh, I thought it was
I told you about this, no?
No, you didn't.
X had a song called Blue Valentine, and you're not supposed to listen to this song while you're driving or while you're doing something that can cause you to literally like pass out.
Why?
So it takes you to such a low frequency, and apparently it lowers your blood pressure and your pulse so low that it takes you to like a state of, it could make you unconscious. But it's that thing of a trance rather than just like the music playing. It's supposed to dive you deeper and like take you
into like stages.
Into stages, literally hypnosis type.
Yeah. No, because like when you're going through like a breakup or anything, you listen to sad songs, which lowers your frequency. When I went through a heartbreak, I tried my best not to listen to.
Did you hear about that Greek Orthodox monk named Mihailo Totolos? No. It's this monastery in like this like really remote part of Greece. It's on a mountain, right? No women have ever entered it.
What?
And stuff. He was dropped off there as an infant and was raised in that monastery, became a monk, and he died recently at the age of like 82, I think, without ever seeing a woman.
Oh my gosh.
He had no idea what a woman looked like.
It'd be terrifying.
Isn't that crazy?
The first time I've ever seen a woman, that would make your mind like explode, right?
Yeah.
It's like, why is your eyelashes so long? I mean, because they probably all looked fairly similar, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be very trippy.
Isn't that crazy though?
Yeah.
Do you feel bad for him?
I mean, he was probably happy. He didn't know what he was missing.
Josh, the correct answer is, yeah, I'm really upset that he never got to meet a girl like you.
Aww.
That's what you should have done. That's what I would have said.
Why are you talking to my wife like that?
I would never say that to your wife.
You just did.
I'm glad that monk didn't meet her.
Oh, hey!
Boo women.
Oh my god.
Grief and loss can eat you from the inside out like a parasite. And grief and loss do strange things to people, including ripping families apart. I'm Chuck. I'd love to be your movie guy. Hit the like button, give me a follow, and this is The Demon Disorder. This is about a man named Graham who is haunted by his past and he can't get over the grief of losing his father. The loss of his father has put a gigantic wedge between him and his two brothers. When his middle brother shows up and has a message that is absolutely eerie and haunting, things begin to change between these brothers. The Demon Disorder is a prime example of what to do with a small budget. It has great cinematography and it has very strong acting performances to carry it along. And every ounce of money they could put into the practical effects, they did. Because this movie got some gnarly ass shit in it. What starts as a slow burn character study about three brothers and their grief goes off the rails pretty quick. And when it gets to where it's going, there is some brutal practical effects to be had. I don't think The Demon Disorder is the greatest movie that I ever seen, but I really enjoyed my time with this one, especially the last half and the practical effects. The Demon Disorder is dropping this Friday, September 6th on Shudder, and I'd like to thank them for allowing me to see it early. I'm Chuck. I'd love to be your movie guy. Hit the like button. Give me a follow.
I just rewatched this one for my podcast this week, so let's do it. Like the first Unfriended Dark Web is filmed entirely through a computer screen, and this time it's the computer of our main character, Mateus. So the movie opens with Mateus logging into this laptop that is clearly not his, but he manages to get the password right and get in. All the usernames and accounts that are signed into already on this laptop belong to somebody named Nora C. So Mateus signs in and he ends up getting onto this Skype with his friends because they're doing a game night. We have Serena and Nari, who are a couple. They announced their engagement during this. Damon, who lives in the UK. AJ, who is like a YouTuber and like a crazy conspiracy theory guy. Their friend Lex. And we also separately see Mateus talking to his girlfriend Amaya, and we can tell that there's some tension in the relationship because she's deaf and they have trouble communicating. So as Mateus is on the Skype call, he sees that Nora C's Facebook is getting some like really strange messages. Like it's from all these different women saying, "Are you sending the plane ticket?" And then he gets a message from this girl named Erica Dunn, and they say, "Hey, this is the person whose laptop that you stole. You need to give it back." So Mateus feels kind of guilty and he's like, okay, fine, I'll leave it in the place where I left it, like I'll meet you there in a few. But then he sees that Nora's Facebook gets a Facebook message from this person called Sharon68. And this person's saying some weird shit like, hey, I liked your last contribution, I'll double your pay if you can do something special for me on the next one. So at this point, Mateus has realized that there is only one file on this computer and it is like an untitled drive. So he asks his friend Damon how to reveal the hidden files in it because he's like a tech guy and he walks him through how. So Mateus messages Sharon back and is like, what are you talking about contributions? And Sharon is like, not here, talk on the river. And sure enough, Mateus reveals these hidden files and finds that there is an app called The River. So he logs on and this Sharon person is telling him that the special thing that he's looking for is for trephination. And he Googles it and finds that it is when you drill a hole into somebody's skull. So that's enough to freak Mateus out and he exits out of the river. So he tells everybody on the Skype call about this and he's screen sharing and he decides to go through the rest of the files in the untitled folder. And what he finds is a bunch of snuff films of women. And the most recent one is titled Erica Dunn, and that's the same person that had messaged him earlier saying, you have my laptop. The video is of Erica sleeping, and this man comes in through her window and just stares at her and then looks up at the camera. Mateus Googles Erica Dunn and finds out that this is a 17-year-old girl who is indeed currently missing. So Mateus now gets a video call from Amaya and he goes to answer it. But when he answers, she's not there, but her roommate Kelly is. Kelly comes to the camera and behind her, somebody shows up and just like attacks her and drags her away. And it turns out this is Nora C, whose name backwards is Sharon. And he's like, if you don't give me my laptop back, I am going to kill Amaya. You need to make her come to your house. I will follow her. She won't even know what's going on and we'll switch then. She'll be safe. I get my laptop. If any of your friends call the police, I will kill Amaya. So the rest of the group is freaking out about the films they just saw. Nari is threatening to go to the police, but Mateus convinces them that the whole thing was a joke. He's like, don't worry, it was an app I made. It's just a joke, like I got you. So Mateus at this point has also discovered on that untitled drive that there is a link to Bitcoin, and in the account is $10 million in Bitcoin. And Mateus decides to transfer that to his own Bitcoin account as quote-unquote insurance until he gets Amaya back alive. And also until Erica Dunn is returned to her family. So then Sharon notices this and contacts Mateus and is like, you are fucking dumb. They're going to see this and they're going to think I'm trying to cash out. Like, you are dealing with a whole circle of people, and if they know that I lost this laptop and somebody else knows, they are going to kill us all. So eventually Amaya gets onto the subway where she loses connection, and because Sharon has been hacking through her phone and that's how he's been talking to Mateus, Mateus is now able to tell the rest of the friend group that it's real because Sharon can't hear. So he tells them and he's like, you guys all gotta play cool when she gets connection and when he's listening. But then all of a sudden, like 100 different Sharon accounts join the fucking call. And they play a video of Lex, who had left the chat a little earlier, being thrown off a building. They also show all these different YouTube clips of AJ, and they put together a bunch of clips and call 911 pretending to be AJ. Basically make it sound like he's threatening to go pew pew a mall. A few minutes later, a SWAT team shows up at AJ's house. As he's going to unlock the door for them, the rest of the chat sees that the Sharons are hacking his account to play a shotgun noise. And because they play that, the police think that AJ has a gun and they shoot him and he dies. At this point, Nari has left to go get Nora from the subway. The rest of the Sharons aren't stupid. They fucking know. So at this point, they tell Serena to choose. So they show her footage of her mother, who is terminally ill in a hospital bed, and Nari standing at the tracks at the subway station. They start a countdown, but Serena refuses to choose. So of course, then we see footage of both of them dying. So she flatlines and Nari is pushed in front of the subway and dies. And then a man pops up behind Serena and offs her too. So Mateus at this point leaves. He's like, I have to go get Amaya. So now it's just Damon who starts talking to the hacker that he knows is in the computer. And he's like, joke's on you guys, I filmed this entire fucking thing. But then Sharon pulls up a video where they deep fake Mateus's face on the guy who kidnapped Erica Dunn. Then Damon sees a figure bringing Erica's unconscious body into Mateus's apartment. So it's at this point that Damon realizes what just fucking happened. He calls Mateus on his cell phone and is like, they planned everything. They planted that laptop for you to take it. They've been spying on us. They knew we would get into their files. We transferred the money for them. We recorded everything. They are going to try and frame us with these crimes. Damon's camera cuts out, and when we come back, we see a hooded figure hanging him on his closet door. And also typing a suicide note saying, me and my friends did something really bad. I'm so sorry. So now Mateus calls Amaya, who is like, do I go inside the building? And Mateus is like, the building? I told you to meet me at the park. So now he realizes that one of the Sharons has hacked her and now has pretended to be him and told her to go to this building. And Mateus watches as she is lured into this building and attacked and abducted. So now Mateus is the only one left, and a poll pops up from the Sharons, and it says, should Mateus live? And ultimately it's revealed that the most votes are for no. And as Mateus sees this, he is hit by a van in the street and dies. And then we see Erica Dunn wake up in Mateus's apartment, and she approaches the camera, and we see that she has a hole in her forehead. Trephination. Eventually the camera pans out and we see that this whole thing has been a fucking game. It says live broadcast, game night, and there's all these different bets on the players. How many times would Mateus cry? How many times would Damon do this? So the whole thing has just been a big fucking game and a live broadcast on the dark web.
Hashtag Chad Gets the Axe is just a fun-ass found footage comedy horror. 4 unlikable streamers go to a haunted building and they live stream everything that happens within the house. Obviously everything goes really badly for them here. This movie will draw comparisons to Deadstream. Personally, I prefer Deadstream as I think it nailed the horror part better, but I definitely think Chad Gets the Axe is worth your time. There are a couple really effective scary moments, including one with an emoji, and I just wish they kind of built on those a little bit more. If you're on the hunt for something that's just fun and doesn't take itself too seriously, I'd say you've got to check this one out. And as a bonus tip, keep your eye on the live chat. That's one of the funniest parts of this whole movie.
The girl telling the story says that at the time she was 12 years old and her little sister was 10. She says that in Cuernavaca they only had one place where they can go shop around, and it was the Plaza of Cuernavaca. So on this day, her parents and her little sister decided to go to the plaza. And as they were walking through the plaza, they came across a kiosk that was selling like little duendes. She says that she remembers that each duende had like a different thing they can do for you. So like one could bring you good luck, one can bring you a job, one can bring you love, like all of that stuff. She didn't think think that her parents were gonna buy one because honestly the duendes, she said, looked really ugly, and that her dad actually ended up buying one for money. Her mom did try to stop dad from buying the duende, but nevertheless he ended up buying it. So before they left the kiosk, the guy working there told them that they need to leave food out for the duende, that they had to leave out sunflower seeds and water. All of them were like, what the fuck? Because they're like, okay, yeah, sure. Because they were all like, what the fuck? Like, this is just like a little gnome. So even though they all didn't believe that this duende was real, the mom did go and end up buying some sunflower seeds to leave out for the duende. So that same night, they did end up leaving some water and the sunflower seeds for the duende and went to bed. When they all woke up and came downstairs, they noticed that the sunflower seeds have been eaten, like they would open and the seeds have been eaten. But mom was looking at dad and dad was looking at mom, and they're like blaming each other for trying to prank them and try to scare them. So the day went on and mom still thought it was dad and dad still thought it was mom. The following night, this family had 2 dogs that were outside, and in the middle of the night they heard one of the dogs screeching like if somebody was hurting it. They were used to their dogs, so obviously they could tell like what kind of sound they were making, and she says that it was the kind of sound like if something was hitting the dog. So the parents went and go checked on the dog, and they thought maybe like a squirrel was fighting with the dog, so they brought him in. The parents really didn't give it much importance because they didn't see anything out there, so they just thought that maybe another animal was coming and bugging those dogs. So the following day they all came downstairs, and again those sunflower seeds looked like somebody had been eating them, and that same night the dog was crying again like if something was hitting it. So again they bring the dogs inside. They were thinking, wow, this is weird, but they really weren't giving it that much importance. Like they just thought, again, there's an animal outside messing with the dog. So the following night is when her little 10-year-old sister gets up in the middle of the night and runs to her parents' room. So when her little sister wakes up her parents, they're like, what's going on? What's wrong? And the little sister tells them that she's hearing some sounds from underneath her bed. And the parents were like, there's nothing under your bed. And the little girl was crying and crying. So the dad, so that she could not be scared, he was like, let's go to your room and I'm going to show you there's nothing there. So they go to the little girl's room and he pulls the sheets and looks at her and says, see, there's nothing there. And the little girl points, and when he looks underneath, there are these sunflower seeds all under her bed, open like if somebody had been eating them. In that moment, the dad sent the 10-year-old to his bedroom, goes and wakes up the 12-year-old that's telling us a story as an adult now, and they're all on the king-size bed scared as fuck. The girl telling us the story says that her mom was the one who told her about this, but she remembers being woken up like around 3 or 4 in the morning, like not knowing what's going on, just knowing that she was gonna go to sleep in her parents' room. She said that she remembers that the little duende was in her parents' room, and she saw her mom grab it, put it in a trash bag, and throw it in the trash can. So the following morning, the mom was like, wait, I don't want to throw it in the trash, because she was scared that if she let it go to the trash, what if that duende came back again? So instead she was like, I'm gonna go take it back to that guy at the kiosk. So they all go back to the guy at the kiosk, and the mom's like, hey, what is going on? Like, this is happening and this is happening. And the guy was like, oh yeah, it's because they like to play around a lot. So the guy ends up telling them, like, if you want to get rid of it, you would have to dig a hole in your yard, put it in that hole, and then it'll find like a different home. And the mom was like, hell no, I do not want this duende anywhere near my home, nowhere in the land. So she's like, I don't care, you're gonna keep it and we're gonna leave it here. And that's what they did. I just think it's crazy, like they didn't attribute the duende to everything that was happening until like the sunflower seeds were under the little girl's bed. I'm not gonna lie, I love listening to duende stories, but some of them were just like, no, frick that. Because you imagine finding those sunflower seeds under your bed, but not just that, she was obviously hearing something underneath her bed. Like the duende was just chilling under there, eating his sunflower seeds and scaring the fuck out of the 10-year-old.
Fascinating facts you didn't know. 2010, a 16-year-old Canadian named Alexander Vavilov discovered that his 2 parents were actually not Canadian, but KGB spies living under fake names Donald and Tracy. The human body can naturally settle into a sleep-wake cycle of up to 50 hours when there's no day-night cycle to observe. In 1962, geologist Michel Siffre entered a darkened cave where he planned to remain for 2 months, tracking time assuming 1 sleep equals 1 day. Between 1974 and 1990, North Korea tried to dig 4 tunnels under the demilitarized zone, and when South Korea discovered them, North Korea painted the walls black and pretended that they were coal mines. A plane carrying 6,000 pounds of pot crashed into Yosemite National Park. Climbers in the area heard news and salvaged, smoked, and sold sold all of it well before park rangers caught on.
Bjork's stalker. It starts on Ricardo Lopez's 21st birthday. His present to himself is this: the camera to document his life, his art, and most importantly, his big plans. He looks at the camera. Do you want to see something funny? I'm gonna show you who I am. And he pinches his cheeks, so his thumbs are at the edges of his mouth, and he pinches his upper cheeks to make like a very scary smiley face. And he gets closer to the camera and closer. I am a monster. Can you see me smiling at you?
I am a monster. Can you see me smiling at you?
He said that he plans on documenting his plans to send his favorite celebrity an HIV bomb because she deserves to die. So for the next 20 hours, that's over the span of 9 months, he will start documenting his own mental collapse until he finally successfully mails a bomb to London. 9 months later, Ricardo Lopez would be dead. 20 hours of footage would be taped that shows his mind completely breaking apart, and he just gets further and further from reality. And a bomb will be sitting in a South London post office getting ready to be delivered to a famous celebrity's residence. Just sitting there, rattling, bubbling, waiting to be opened. If you were to open the cardboard box, you would see a book in there. A book. And once you open that, everything would go to
Spoiling all the Paranormal Activity movies, and the third one is by far my favorite. Let's do it. Paranormal Activity 3 opens up with a clip of adult Katie and Christy, and this is before the events of the first two films, so it's in 2005. We see that Katie is getting ready to move in with Mika, so she brings a box of old videotapes to Christie's to store in their basement. Fast forward to the events of the second movie, the house is ransacked and burglarized, so they think, and we find out that the only thing that went missing was the box of videotapes that Katie left in the basement. And then we see the tapes that take place in 1988 when Katie and Christy are kids, and that's what we see for the rest of the movie. So we learn that Katie and Christy are living with their mom, Julie, and Julie's boyfriend, Dennis. They don't reference what's happened to the girl's father, but he's not in the picture right now. We see some birthday footage, and we also meet the girl's grandmother, Lois. And then we see a shot of Christy leaving out a bowl of food, and Dennis asks who it's for, and she says her friend Toby because he's hungry. Immediately no, throw the kid away. So we learn that Christy has this imaginary friend named Toby. So Dennis is a wedding videographer, so that's why he has these cameras and he films a lot of home footage. And one night he and Julie start to make a spicy video, but they're interrupted when an earthquake hits. And when he's looking back at the footage, he notices that some dust falls and it almost like outlines a figure that we can't see. So he shows this to his friend Randy, who suggests that Dennis set up cameras around the house to catch if anything else weird is going on. So he does just that, and now we follow the setup of the previous two movies where we watch them sleep and weird shit happens. So he puts one of the cameras in the girls' room, and almost immediately we see Christy get up in the middle of the night one night, and she comes over towards the camera in this corner of the room. And she starts having a conversation with somebody that's not there, and obviously we can't hear the responses that she's hearing. And when Dennis asks who she was talking to, obviously she says, Toby, my friend. He asks Christy what Toby looks like, and she says that he's old like grandma and he's tall. Goodbye. Another night, Dennis and Julie wake up to the sounds of footsteps and thumping, so it starts off small. So Randy comes over again, and he and Dennis make this contraption where they stick a camera to an oscillating fan so they can get like the living room and the kitchen. And that night through the oscillating fan, we see Christy acting super weird. She's like giggling at something in the kitchen. She's standing up on the dining room table, like reaching at something. So they see the footage, and Julie goes to ask Christy, like, was it Toby that you saw? Did he wake you up? And Christy says, why don't you ask him yourself? He's standing right next to you. I could literally never have children because if they said that shit, I would have to leave. I would evacuate. Another day, we see an interaction between Katie and Christy, and Katie is making fun of Christy for having an imaginary friend. And Christy says he's not imaginary, he's in there, pointing to this crawl space in their room. And when Katie goes in to investigate, the door slams and traps her in. But eventually she's able to open the door and get out. One night, Dennis and Julie decide that they're going to have a night out, so they hire a babysitter named Lisa. So we see Lisa sitting in the kitchen after she puts the girls to sleep, and we see this sheeted figure show up behind her. Mind you, this is through the oscillating fan, so we're seeing it like in segments. As Lisa turns, because she can feel something behind her, the sheet drops and it's just gone. There's nobody there. It's the best and scariest shot in this whole franchise. And then we see Lisa come upstairs and go into this corner where we've seen Christy talking into, which we know that's where the crawl space is too, that Toby apparently is. As Lisa approaches the corner, this gust of wind hits her and there's this loud bang, and she just looks absolutely terrified and runs downstairs. And we see her literally just sitting by the door with her things, waiting for Julie and Dennis to come home, and when they do, she leaves immediately. The next night, we see Christy get up and she just stands in Dennis and Julie's doorway staring at them for like 2 hours. And then she goes back upstairs into the corner where she starts talking to presumably Toby, and she tells him that she doesn't want to talk anymore and basically doesn't want to be his friend anymore. The next day, Dennis goes upstairs to look in the crawl space and he finds these like drawings on the wall, and it's this symbol. And then he and Julie find that Christy is burning up with a fever, and they leave to take her to the hospital. And they call Randy to come watch Katie. Katie asks Randy if they can play Bloody Mary because Randy had told her about it earlier. He reluctantly agrees and they go in the girls' bathroom and do it. But in the darkness, Randy gets attacked and we see this giant scratch appear on his torso. And when he looks out into the girls' room, furniture is being thrown all over the place by itself. So Dennis and Julie come home and Randy is pissed and tells Dennis that he needs to tell Julie what's going on because he hasn't told her the extent of everything. So Dennis tries to show Julie, and he shows her this picture that he found in this occult book that he's been studying. And he finds this picture of these women who are all wearing this necklace with the same symbol that was in the crawl space in the girls' room. And he tells Julie how these women are part of a coven, and this coven waits until girls are at childbearing age. They force them to have sons, which they then take, and they brainwash the girls into forgetting everything. But of course, Julie doesn't believe a fucking word of it. As this is happening, Katie comes running in because we just saw her getting lifted up and dragged around by her hair. That night, the girls are then attacked in their room. Katie is literally dragged into the crawl space, and Christy is just talking to Toby saying, "I'll do it, just let her go." Julie at this point is still in denial, but she walks into the kitchen and sees that everything is gone. And before she's even able to process what's happening, everything falls from the ceiling at once. It was all just levitating and just fell at the same time. So at this point, she finally tells Dennis, like, "Okay, you're right, something's up, let's go to Grandma's." So the four of them get in the car and go to Grandma Lois's. But that night, Dennis and Julie are woken up by these loud noises. Julie goes to investigate, and eventually Dennis follows. But when Dennis goes downstairs, he sees symbols drawn on the wall that match the symbols from the occult book and the crawl space. Dennis goes into the shed when he can't find anybody in the house, but when he opens the door, he sees this group of women all dressed in black, including Lois. So he runs back into the house, but he finds Julie levitating at the top of the stairs. And her body literally throws itself at Dennis and knocks him down the stairs. Dennis finds Christy, who's crying and terrified, and the two of them hide in a closet. Eventually, when he thinks the coast is clear, he walks out with Christy, and outside he sees all these women surrounding this bonfire. Dennis sees Katie at the base of the stairs next to Julie's lifeless body. He tries to call out to her, but she doesn't turn around, so he goes up to her and touches her shoulder. And when Katie turns around, she has black eyes. And she growls at him, and Dennis obviously falls back in fear, and when he looks up, Katie's gone. Dennis crawls towards Julie's body, but before he can get there, Lois comes out. She just looks down at him, and Dennis is attacked by an unseen force, and his body completely bends backwards, and he dies. Lois grabs Katie's hand, and the two of them start to walk upstairs. But then Christy comes running out to follow them, but before she goes up the stairs, she looks back and she says, "Come on, Toby," and then follows them upstairs, and the movie ends.
This is Ed Gein, the infamous real-life murderer and grave robber who inspired some of our favorite horror characters like Norma Bates, Leatherface, and Buffalo Bill. And this is Kane Hodder, horror movie icon who you probably know best as Jason Voorhees or Victor Crowley from the Hatchet franchise. But were you aware that Kane played Ed Gein in this 2007 low-budget film? I'm Ian Van Gool, your horror movie hype man. If you love horror movies, then smash that follow button. And today, we're talking about Ed Gein, the Butcher of Plainfield. So this film is about the twisted and murderous appetites of the notorious Ed Gein, whose depredations in his small town of Plainfield come as quite a shock to his neighbors. So right off the bat, if you want a movie about Ed Gein that stays fairly close to the true story, then check out this one that came out in 2000. But if you want one that takes quite a few liberties with the real events, has more brutality and blood and gore, and of course, stars Kane Hodder, then check this one out. Horror legend Michael Berryman also plays a role, but outside of him and Kane being in this, there's not too much going on. Like I said, there are a few brutal moments and some blood and gore, but it's pretty tame compared to most of their other work. I still find it entertaining overall, so if you haven't seen it, then it's worth a watch just to check it out. And you can currently find it streaming on Tubi in the US. If you've seen Ed Gein, the Butcher of Plainfield, then let me know what you think of it. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
This is the case of serial killer Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. This might be one of the most messed up true crime cases I've ever read. I mean, obviously, he's one of the most notorious serial killers of all time, but the details in this case are so disturbing and terrifying. But this case does have one of the most satisfying ways I've ever read of a serial killer getting caught and arrested. Richard's father was a hardworking Christian man, but he was also an alcoholic, very angry and very abusive. When Richard was 2 years old, he experienced a traumatic, serious head injury, and then only 3 years later, he experienced a second serious head trauma at age 5. But by the time he's only 5 years old, we have two of the biggest components in like the recipe of what creates a serial killer: abuse and head trauma, but it only gets worse. When Richard was about 12 years old, he began escaping his father's abuse and anger by spending as much time as possible with his older cousin Mike. Cousin Mike was a celebrated veteran after serving in the Vietnam War. Okay, so quick history lesson. A lot of American soldiers, not all, but a lot of American soldiers did a lot of evil things to Vietnamese female citizens during the Vietnam War, like assault, SA, and unaliving them. And Mike was one of those American soldiers. Turns out evil runs in the family. Cousin Mike would show photos to Richard that he had taken of the women that he essayed and unalived while he was serving in Vietnam. Many of the women in these photos would be missing a body part, typically their head. Cousin Mike told the 12-year-old Richard that he did that to the women after he unalived them because the people of Vietnam believed that if you lost a limb or like a body part after death, that you would not be able to go to heaven because he's seriously such a messed up individual. And 12-year-old Richard did not think that this was disturbing or gross or cruel. He thought it was cool. He looked up to his older cousin Mike. And then one day, right in front of the young Richard, cousin Mike shot and unalived his wife during an argument. And cousin Mike was found not guilty by reason of insanity for this, spent only 4 years in a mental hospital before being released back into society. Richard is now 13 going on 14, and he's living with his sister and his sister's husband, and his brother-in-law was like an obsessed peeping Tom. So he would take the young teenage boy Richard out with him at night to look in the windows of like his pretty neighbors. It was around this time that Richard, who's 14 years old, got his first part-time job working at a hotel, and he would use the master key at the hotel to break into the hotel guests' rooms and just steal anything of value. It was when he was 14 working at this hotel that he broke into the hotel room of a married couple, attempted to essay the wife, but was beaten up really badly by her husband. But the couple did not press charges, and 14-year-old Richard was free to go. As a young adult, he moved to California, where he became the Night Stalker that we all know and hate today. His first known victim was a little 9-year-old girl. It was in 1984. This little 9-year-old girl was looking on the street for $1 that she thought she lost. And Richard came up to her and said that he knew where her missing money went, and he lured her into the basement of an apartment complex where he assaulted her, essayed her, and then unalived her. Sadly, this case would go unsolved for over 20 years as it was not linked to Richard until 2009. And it was after this crime that Richard Ramirez started his 14-month-long killing spree in LA and other parts of California. About 6 months into his killing spree, he was arrested for stealing a car. He spent about 1 month in prison for this, but it was this mugshot that eventually led to his downfall. I think the thing that was particularly terrifying about Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, compared to other serial killers is that Richard Ramirez did not have a type when it came to his victims. To the Night Stalker, it didn't matter your gender, your age, your race, or how much money you had. No one was safe when Richard Ramirez decided he was going to break into your house that night. Richard Ramirez would typically hunt during the weekends. It would always be in the middle of the night. He would break into any home. It was completely random. He would rob the house of anything of value, essay any women that were in the house, and then typically unalive or attempt to unalive anybody in the home. And then he began to escalate his crimes in even more disturbing ways, whether it was drawing a pentagram on the wall or taking a woman's eyes as a trophy. First, it was only LA, and everyone in LA knew who the serial killer, the Night Stalker was, and they were all terrified that he would come into their house in the middle of the night. So what does Richard Ramirez do? He begins targeting other cities outside of LA. He wanted the entire state of California terrified of him. It was in one of those other cities that he broke into the home of a young engaged couple that were soon to be married. He shot the man 3 times and then repeatedly essayed the woman named Inez. And then after this, he left her alive and told her to tell them that you just met the Night Stalker. I think that he did this because he wanted the media to link this crime and his other crimes outside of LA to the ones in LA. He wanted everyone to know and be terrified that he could strike anytime, anywhere. But it would be this decision that would lead to his arrest, because now they knew what he looked like, and then they found his fingerprints, and then they had his name. Richard Ramirez was the Night Stalker. And by the next morning, his mugshot was on the front page of every newspaper in California. Now I get to tell you about the most satisfying way a serial killer has ever been caught and arrested. Richard Ramirez boarded a bus to LA with no idea that now everyone knows who he is. Once he gets off the bus in LA, very quickly people recognize him. They begin staring at him, they're whispering, they're pointing at him, and then someone says, "That's him. That's the Night Stalker." Richard Ramirez, he tries to flee, he just starts running, but multiple regular old citizens are just on the street, start chasing him down the street, and they're telling other people as they pass by, "That's the guy." This is the guy that for over a year had been terrorizing their city and killing their citizens. And now there's a mob of them all chasing after him down the street. And then they catch him and then they start wailing on him. There's like over 100, I think several hundred people now surrounding him, and multiple of them have him on the ground and they're hitting him and they're kicking him and just pounding on him. Some local police officers try to go and break up this fight. Well, it's not really a fight, he's just getting jumped. And then they realize that the guy who's getting jumped is the Night Stalker. During his trial, he had a lot of fans. He was like a celebrity. He had a lot of groupies, a lot of females who thought that he was attractive. He was getting hundreds of letters like a day. He was getting multiple marriage proposals, similar to Ted Bundy and now more recently Wade Wilson. This is such a weird epidemic, and we talked about it recently, how women become obsessed with these killers. If you're one of them, you're weird and you need to stop. Richard Ramirez was being charged with the deaths of 13 people and the attempted unaliving of 5 more. This is for the crimes that they had concrete proof that he did commit in LA, but it is believed that his victim count is more probably in the 20s or even the 30s. But he was found guilty of all of these charges and sentenced to death. But he actually passed away behind bars before his execution in 2013 at the age of 53 years old after 23 years on death row. I told you guys that this case was going to be wild from start to finish. I mean, did I lie? You guys have been asking me to cover this case on Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, since I started posting true crime back in January. Typically, I try to cover cases that are a little bit less well known, but you guys have been asking me to cover this case and some of the other more notorious serial killers in history for such a long time. So if you want me to do, for maybe the next 2 weeks, cover some of the more well-known notorious serial killers in history, let me know in the comments. Let me know all your thoughts on this case. I love you guys so much, and I'll see you tomorrow.
I've not watched anything this fucked up for a very long time. This one made me feel physically sick. But it's a disturbing movie that I think is very much worth your time if you're into this kind of stuff. My name's Rookie. I love disturbing film. And this is Flowers. So this movie was recommended to me by Chuck. If you don't know Chuck, get to know Chuck. I'll tag him down below. It was released in 2015 and directed by Phil Stevens. And it's about a woman, or women rather, who wake up underneath some guy's house. And as we follow these women, or women, we assume that they are trying to get out, they're trying to escape. But this guy is home, we think, above them. And he is not a nice man. As we follow the lead characters through this movie, we can see that they are being confronted by things in their past, perhaps. Past traumas. But it's confusing because we don't know why these things are in this house. Why the hell are they seeing what they're seeing? It doesn't make any sense. And that's what this movie does. It sets out to confuse you, to scare you. And it does that very, very successfully. This movie does lean more to the artistic side of horror than anything else, as well as being incredibly, incredibly fucked up. There are numerous scenes throughout this film that left me feeling absolutely sick. I don't want to ruin anything, because if you want to watch this film, it's something you should figure out for yourself. But there is one scene in particular that involves a woman in a crawl space and some pipes and some things being flushed down them pipes. There is consumption of rotten food, substances, and a whole load of gruesome body horror. But what I think this film does differently to other disturbing films that I've seen recently is it keeps you interested throughout the entire thing. You're constantly trying to figure out what the hell is going on, because there are little sections throughout this film that have tiny little alterations, and at first I was wondering whether I was imagining what I was seeing. So this film does keep it interesting from start to finish. I think it's a psychoanalysis on trauma. I do think that this film could potentially be slightly problematic in the way that this guy has picked his victims, and what it's saying about the things that they decide to do outside of the narrative of this film. Things that they do in their everyday lives as a job, or things that they have accidentally fallen into and find it difficult to get out. I felt slightly like this film may have demonized that a little bit. But this is a disturbing film that I think I will return to. I really quite enjoyed this one. If you do want to watch this, beware. It is one of the more fucked up films I've seen this year. But it's one, again, that I'll probably rewatch.